Yay, and hello and welcome everybody to the Working with Pluto workshop. And I am Tony, and I'm really excited to get started since this is one of my very favorite topics on the planet. I tend to ramble, and so I hope to keep it I hope to keep it not so long. I'm gonna start by sharing my screen, making sure I've got to have it on the right one. Okay, there we go. All right, everybody see it now? Perfect. Okay, great. So, yes, welcome. And so what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be covering, well, basically about Pluto. I'll just everything that I love about it, blah blah blah. All the facts. We're going to be talking about those, as well as its mythology, its correlation with generational themes, which is one of my very favorite things to talk about. We're going to talk about Pluto's aspects and placements in personal charts, correlation with its placement in recent events. Like, yeah, Pluto often has it whenever it clicks into certain positions. It often corresponds with major world events. And so it always gives me goosebumps. I'm really excited to talk about that as well. I've pulled a couple of charts from different times. And we're going to talk about personal transits as pathways for transformation. I'm going to lead an exercise to help you with healing. It's an inner child exercise, which when you're working with the inner child, that's really powerful work to be doing with Pluto. We'll do a questions and answers, and I have to make sure that I slide that in there. So if anybody catches me just kind of rambling and going on and mowing over the Q&A, be like, stop. Okay, and then we'll do a little bit of chart reading after I stop the recording. And so here, I'm gonna move to the second slide here. Okay, so Pluto is associated with breakdowns and with breakthroughs, topics that are considered taboo and that which culture tells us shouldn't be seen or heard about, like sex, death, the occult, that which is hidden. It has to do with qualitative change, and once you go through a Plutonian transformation, you can't go back again. We've talked about the hero's journey in the past, and this is Pluto really is the planet of that signifies that entire cycle, that transformation that happens. um, so yeah, you can't go back again. It shows about massive transformation. It's a like there's TV shows right now that you can catch, like Glow Up, or like those interior design masters, or The Biggest Loser, those that show like actual like physical manifestations of that transformation. Those are very Plutonian, and they highlight the process that's behind transformation as well, which I think is great. You don't just see before and after, you witness the entire transformation, and oftentimes it's really icky and it's not fun, and you see people breaking down and crying, so that definitely signified that process. This planet is associated with caves and mines and black markets and secret police and hackers. Anything about the study of psychology is very Plutonian. It's where we've been operating undercover, repressed desires that are revealed. With Pluto, death is only a juncture point, so it's kind of like a gateway. Uh, I think a lot of us have probably heard that death is like a gateway to transformation. There's always rebirth on the other side. There's always something else. So there's always a promise of rebirth, even though the process may be painful. The concept of recycling is also Plutonian. So you go out into the woods, you see a decaying tree with all of the vermin and such, assisting in the decomposition so that it can feed the earth and make it fertile again. Pluto in society examines the topics that are considered taboo. Lately, it's politics. Like, you just don't want to talk politics to anyone. It's just a bad idea. That's definitely, I know, a taboo subject. Pluto urges us to hold on to the depth of mystery of death and honor it for the rite of passage that it is. In ancient cultures, the art of anathema was revered and carried out by women who assisted the dying, and they assisted them in looking death in the eye, and they assisted in helping them to die with dignity. And it required the art of letting go entirely, which is not easy for a lot of people. With the rise of religion, death started to be linked with the feminine principle. The human ego was inserted into it, and people were convinced that death was associated with that which was evil. We eventually learn that death is something that needs to be avoided at all costs, and we link it with fear. And when we need to recognize that there's a fallacy in that thinking, there, and same thing goes with sex, all those things that are Plutonian. Pluto is the planet of instinct, and ruling it rules our instinctual drives. Mars motivates us to do things in the outer world, while Pluto motivates us to do things on in our inner world. So, rage is Plutonian. The type of rage that's connected with like infant hunger, when you see a baby just kind of like lose it, that's connected to Pluto. Oftentimes you'll see when you see people acting out and just like they just completely lose it, that's often connected to that infantile rage as well. And so it's pretty fascinating. So it's a sign of unresolved conflict from childhood, feeling overpowered in some way. Pluto is a planet of power. Let's see here. I want to make sure that I've got everybody. I don't want to. Oh, yay. Kelsey's coming. Awesome. Okay. Welcome, Kelsey. Pluto is a planet of power, and yet many complexes point back. And we talk about complexes. There's a lot of Carl Jung that we study in astrology as well, and as well as Freud, a lot of Freudian stuff. In fact, it's really interesting that that Pluto was discovered around the same time that Freud came out with his stuff. So like Maisha's like, it figures. So it's a planet of power, and many complexes point back to that feeling of powerlessness. Yet Pluto transits give us the opportunity to heal those childhood wounds. They come up as painful sensations in the mind and in the body. They linger. We're tasked with steeping in the feelings for a few years. By the end of the transit, you've been transformed. And the only way to go through is to surrender. So when a Pluto transit is approaching, you can feel it a little bit, but then once that first hit happens, it'll rock your world and it'll knock you off your feet. Then Pluto will it'll go retrograde, and then it'll come, and then you'll feel it yet again, and then it'll come back and hit. So you get 3 hits with Pluto. So whatever lessons it has to teach you, you're going to learn it, whether or not you like it. And the only thing that you can do is surrender to it. The house that Pluto falls into in a birth chart is where we get to know Pluto's principles. So the first house, and if it's in the first house or on the ascendant has everything to do with looks and physical appearance. You can see it in their face. In the second house, the second house has to do with money and resources that we have available to us. And this can be connected with death, like death and rebirth through poverty or riches, like a rags to riches story is often linked with the second house, Pluto and second house. You may go through hell and back with money, and as if death were taking place. In the third house, if it's in the third house, this is a mental house of communication, and we learn to communicate through our siblings, our sibling relationships. And so those early relationships are third house stuff. Pluto here can point to intellectual patterns that break down throughout time. If Pluto is in the 4th or the 10th house, I get really a lot more into this later on today, but A fourth or 10th house can signify a parent's death, could tell us about mortality. If it's in the third house, if Pluto's in the third house, you could learn about the concept of death and mortality through um, the passing of a sibling. In the seventh, it would be a partner. In the eighth, it would be a lover, or in the 11th, it would be a friend. Ninth house Pluto, there's a philosophical context to it. Um, People might write about it. Authors that have that write about death may have a ninth house Pluto, 10th house Pluto. Those folks may become morticians. 10th house is career, and so yeah, or they may be thrust into power. Oftentimes, you see people who have 10th house Plutos. They're in powerful positions, and maybe they didn't want to be, but they just were shoved there. So, any questions so far? All good. Okay, awesome. Okay, so when we sense that we're beginning the descent into the underworld, so that Pluto is going to drag you into the underworld, it's important to remember that we're going to be coming back with something special. So, Pluto facts. I just want to talk about some of these. It takes 248 years, about 248 years, give or take a few, for the planet to orbit around the sun. It spends 12 to 21 years in each sign. It can even go up to 30 something years. It spends most of its time in Taurus and the least amount of time in Scorpio. Thank goodness, because that's whoo. Kelsey and I were talking about that. It was discovered on February 18th, 1930. And again, that was when Freud came out with his landmark work. Psychoanalysis is a very Plutonian concept, and that was just here. Let's talk about psychoanalysis. It's 1930. We just discovered Pluto. Civilization. It corresponds with civilization and its discontents, discussing how civilization represses our natural instincts, all that can be considered taboo in our world. Freud's book also brought into light that, yeah, it was brought into light the same year that Pluto was discovered. I had that written down twice. I just felt like it was really interesting, so I had to go talk about it twice. Apparently, scientists at Lowell Observatory were studying Neptune, and they were noticing that it was wobbling a little bit. And when they saw that, they realized that there was another cold and distant rock out there, which was Pluto, and it was named after the god of the underworld. They noticed that Pluto was only a fraction of the size of Earth, and it was more like an asteroid, yet the planet label stuck for 70 years. But Pluto was odd, and poor Pluto. I'm like, no, don't be mean to Pluto. But Pluto was odd, and it didn't really fit in with the other planets. Its orbit was strange. It actually crosses into Neptune's orbit for some reason. It's got a really strange orbit. In the 1990s, other Pluto-like objects were observed in the Kuiper Belt, like Sedna and Orcus. Eventually, a body that was large enough to almost qualify as a planet entered the scene, which was Eris, which is associated with the mythological goddess of discord. So that one is Eris is a really interesting planet to study, because that one it's almost like you've got Pluto, but then Eris like takes it up a notch. So, whew, it's a heavy duty one. On August 24, 2006, astronomers made the decision to reclassify the bodies associated in the Kuiper Belt as dwarf planets. So since the reclassification has been, since then the reclassification has been up for debate. Yet less than 5% of astronomers were in the room when the decision was made to demote poor Pluto. But yet that year was also marked by the execution of Saddam Hussein. A woman receiving the first face transplant was spotted in public for the first time. So I think that that's a really interesting thing. So it's, yeah, he was demoted, and all these interesting things happen. In observing this planetary body and the transits to it, there's a clear that association with the cycle of day and night, birth and death, rising from the underworld So rising from the underworld to that which is seen. Once we're confronted with the truth of what is seen, and then we're tasked with dealing with that dragon, or confronting our fears, or dealing with the monster, with healing the wounds that are caused by earlier traumas so that we can sense our power. And that's what this that's what this planet represents. It's transformational healing. It's moving from a place of powerlessness into power. So and I often sometimes cry with this. So if I end up crying, I'm sorry. So we'll talk about Pluto's mythology next. um, Myths and archetypes help us to connect our inner world to our connect our the outer world with our inner world, and to understand our own humanity. And they help us to conceptualize where we have power, this particular one. So Pluto represents the life force that is operating on the subconscious level of the psyche. In every myth associated with Pluto, there's a theme of diving down into the emotional depths of the soul, where we encounter our demons, where we're dismembered, like Dionysus. They connect Dionysus with Pluto as well, with Hades, or Osiris, and brought back to life. Since it's associated with hell, since it's such a horrible place, Christianity associated it with the devil. But the gods and goddesses of the underworld aren't here to warn us of impending fate of doom. They were often associated with vegetation gods like Osiris, Demeter, or Persephone, which show that life and death are connected in a cycle of transformation. Osiris was even depicted with barley growing out of his mummified body. On the descent into the underworld, there's often a cave of some sort in all of these stories. It's really interesting, followed by a period of purgatory or purification, where the soul is stripped of its worldly attachments before it can move on to eternity or on to rebirth. This might involve a confrontation with monsters, of course, and demons, like we've talked about, but the idea was to free the soul after through that confrontation. Pluto calls for evolution on a soul level. It was Pluto was named after the Greek god of the underworld and was also known as Hades. So Hades took Persephone, the Venusian archetype, down into the underworld. And it's really interesting because when you see Venus in the sky, those of you who did the Venus course, Hades took Persephone down into the underworld, and you'll even see that Venus sort of follows that same path in the sky, goes down into the underworld. You can't see it for a little bit. It's the evening star, and then it rises again as the morning star. So it's really cool. So yeah, took Persephone down into the underworld. She ate 6 pomegranate seeds, and then she was fated to stay there for 6 months of the year. Dionysus and Hades were often seen as identical. Hades served the Fates, who were the true rulers of the underworld. Even though Hades was considered the god of the underworld, they were the goddesses, and they existed before he did. The underworld is where the stuff of rebirth and regeneration is. It's where we encounter our demons, the emotional depth of the soul. Let's see. So here we have the 3 fates. So prior to Hades were the Fates, and these were self-fertilizing goddesses that were known as the oldest power in the universe. The Fates were responsible for weaving the reality of each person's life. The moon goddess, Hecate, she was the goddess of witchcraft, childbirth, magic, borders, and liminal spaces. But this one here is Kali Ma. Kali is also associated with Pluto, and she's a Hindu goddess, and she signifies destruction and darkness. Demons and gods were at war with each other, and so this is the way the story goes. The demons and gods were at war with each other. The demons were out to win and take over the world. The goddess Durga, she rode on a tiger, and she was battling this demon, and he multiplied himself into a fiercer form, and blood would drop as soon as blood would drop from him, she would cut him, and blood would drop, and more would spring forward and come out. And so Durga realized that what was happening. So she realized that she needed a fiercer, much more powerful expression of the feminine. No mercy, not graceful, one that was feared. And she called on the fiercest dark feminine, which is Kali Ma, who sprang from her forehead, naked, bloodthirsty, just rage. There was rage. There was dark blue. That there's that Plutonian rage coming out. Dark blue, tongue sticking out, hair wild and untamed, and she could destroy illusion, and just tons of rage. Expression on her face was fierce, but yet that there's love and there's truth there too. Pluto is interested in stripping away anything that is just clouding our truth. She didn't care what other people thought, or what others thought, other beings even. She was just there to do the thing. And so she screamed to the demons, enough, I'm here because I love you. I'm not here. I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself to destroy the world. I'm here because I know who you are. Even you, the most disgusting, tricky demon. When I feel into what you're made of, I cannot but love you. I cannot not love you, and that's why I'm going to eat you. So I'm going to eat all of those perverted, violent ego structures that keep you trapped. You're not going to like it. You're going to resist me. You're going to judge me. It doesn't matter because I love you. I won't let you get away with your petty games. So yeah, she's like out for blood, but yet it's like it's righteous. So she begins devouring the demons, and she's defeated the demon. She eventually defeats the demon, and she saves the world with her destruction. And it just makes me think of just like fires just blowing through a forest and rejuvenating the soil. I guess it adds that nitrogen to the soil when you have these fires in the forest. Which wow. So after she defeated the demon, it was almost like she became drunk with her rage. Right? She continued on her path of destruction. She kind of lost her mind. Shiva, her consort, was sent to stop her, but there was no stopping her. She was just going for blood. And finally, Shiva laid down, and he exposed his vulnerable belly and his chest, and he loved her unconditionally. So Kali's eyes met his, and she woke up from her trance. And so that right there, it's just that he exposed the most vulnerable part of himself, and that's what calmed that fierce rage. So it appears that when there is significant pain, um, she unveils pain. She unveiled the pain to be healed. She does this from love. She is the beloved giver of blessings, and so people work with her a lot when they're dealing with a whole lot of stuff. I know Stephanie, who was on the Scorpio workshop. She works with Kali Ma a lot, and during 2020, all throughout 2020, when the lockdowns were happening, we were constantly talking about working with her. So it's really interesting. We don't summon her, but we are drawn to her when the soul is in need. It's like a spider that's occupying a space in your car. It's so funny. I've heard a story about that recently that cracks me up. But it's like a spider that's occupying a space in your car that needs to be relocated by you. Kali Ma will relocate us. So it can be shocking and it can be painful, but it's what needs to be done. So should that spider struggle, there's a chance that it may lose its life. But similarly, should one resist the transformation that Pluto is offering, it will make the relocation much more difficult. So Kali, Pluto, is the constructive use of destructive energy. So she is the end of the beginning, the end at the beginning, sorry. Pluto stands for the cycle of death and rebirth. She helps to clear the obstacles that we have established, foolishly believing that they are good for us. We seem to think that we know what's good for us, and then, Pluto comes along, and you're like, oh wait, that was wrong. So she assumes fierce form to assist those in need of wrathful and ferocious power. So she's a great one to work with when you need to gain strength, when you just feel like life has knocked you off your rocker. There's an ability to pull life force from one form to birth another, hunger for life itself. All right, so we're going to head into generational themes now. So Pluto is often what we cling to, and each generation participates in correcting the errors of the one before it. Not that one generation will intend to do anything malicious so that the next one has to fix it. It doesn't work that way. We are products of our upbringing, of what's happening in the collective, and what's happening in the world. So it's where we take things too far. It reveals that which needs to be stripped away to be our true selves. So here are the generational themes. Here you can see how long Pluto stays in each one of the signs. So it definitely, there's Cancer had 26 years. It stuck around in there for a while. Leo, a little bit less, 18 years. Virgo, 16 years. And you see Libra and Scorpio. No, just kind of like pass through those two. Sagittarius, 13 years. Capricorn, where it's at now. What is it? I can't see that there. Yeah. Oh, I can't do the math, you guys. My brain, never mind. But it stays a little bit longer in
16.
Capricorn. Huh? What is it?
16.
Thank you, 16. It'll be in Aquarius for 16 years. And so it'll continue it spends most of its time in Taurus, though. And there's even talk that maybe Pluto should rule Taurus instead of Scorpio, since it only spends a short amount of time in Scorpio. But they also say that Pluto is also quite earthy. There's an earth element to Pluto. So kind of interesting. So here we go. Pluto in Cancer. Pluto in Cancer, 1913 to 1939, 26 years it spends there. The concept, the generational theme, the generational question for these folks is, am I safe? Jane Fonda is a poster child, and she lived through or this group of kids that were born during this time. They lived through two world wars, the Spanish flu, the real estate, or not real estate, but the I was going to say that there was hoarding of cash, and there was hoarding of supplies, and so yeah, these folks lived through really, really dark times. So and Pluto puts us face to face with what's scary. And so during this time, of course, as we know, we had two world wars that started. So imagine it. This is a group of really imaginative, helpful, protective, and understanding folks. Okay. Pluto and Leo. We have our poster child there. It's Mick Jagger. Pluto and Leo spends 18 years there. And the question is, am I special? This group is obsessed with youth and age looks. I think that plastic surgery became a thing with this group. Really interesting. Self-expression is really important for this group as well. Leo, of course, I feel so bad because we just didn't do the Leo play shop, and now I'm like, I want to do that. But Leo's biggest fear is not being seen and not being acknowledged, and so there's self-expression is very important. Showmanship and creativity. Rock star royalty became a thing back then. ego compulsion, standing out to be the king of the mountain. These folks have made a big deal out of like the lead singer getting all of the attention. They're here to shine and to express. They want to be the first to draw attention to a certain idea. Queen Elizabeth, I think it's interesting that Queen Elizabeth's coronation happened in 1953, which was the first ever coronation to be televised. So she's had to grow through like media and all of that stuff, and it's really interesting. I don't know if you watch The Crown, but that's it's really interesting. Uh, it was a time when broadcasting became much more commonplace. Gay Hendricks, in the self-help world, wrote "Learning to Love Yourself." Self-love movement really picked up during this time. He became obsessed with the inner child, and Bradshaw had natal Pluto in Cancer. Pluto and Cancer folks have deep familial wounds. It was kind of like we're just surviving. Like that's what it was. And so, coming into the Pluto and Leo generation, um, they brought that in, and so. Rock star royalty don't necessarily want to give up the throne. um, and what do we have? It's what we have a hard time surrendering, and so yeah, they have a hard time surrendering the throne. They want to be up there and they want to have that attention, which is not a bad thing. Love from the inside out has become functionally healthy at this point. They're driven by fear of being forgotten and difficulty settling into later years. They'll only surrender to the stage when they can no longer walk onto it. they say. So Pluto elevates what it touches, and it may stay. It may we may say that today's music. They may say that today's music lacks showmanship and pizzazz. So Mick Jagger. And then it's so funny to look at Mick Jagger, and then you've got Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain just like, all right. So the question for Pluto in Virgo, Pluto stayed in Virgo for 16 years. And the question for Virgo is, do I have worth? So this was a time when self-help author Brene Brown, she came onto the scene with the gifts of imperfection, dealing with feelings of inferiority and shame, and research-based practical. It's research-based, it's practical, it's simple, all of those Virgo things. Virgo likes to research and make sure things are practical. This is mined from the previous generation. But yet this group has, instead of the Leo kind of like, we're going to be here on the stage, Virgo's like more, there's a self-depreciation concept there. There's a lot of self-loathing in this generation. Pluto and Virgo elevates this to a whole new art form, as you see Kurt Cobain there. This generation also had a Uranus-Pluto conjunction that lasted for years. It's really interesting to see the music that came out of that time. Again, Kurt Cobain has this in his chart. Dave Matthews, my favorite, he's got it. I think Martha Beck, who is, I follow a lot of her work, and her work is very, very Plutonian as well. She also has this Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and it's really, really fascinating. This group captured the grunge scene with young Americans. Pluto and Virgo, utilitarian and earthy, and it's echoing Pluto's connection with the earth element. These kids have been criticized for being slackers, selling out became a criticism. So that was the criticism that the Pluto and Virgo generation had of Pluto and Leo is, oh, you're selling out. We're not going to sell out. I'm going to just do my hair all crazy. Whoa, we're latchkey kids. And self-sufficient. They became self-sufficient out of necessity. Attention turned to functional rather than fashionable. And again, like it's almost like an anti-Leo. So we're always there. The generations are always responding to the one before it. Messy hair. The criticism is they're subservient to Pluto and Leo. So here's Rashida Jones. Pluto and Libra. I, I've done a lot of work on her chart, so I think she's interested. um, so Pluto stayed in Libra for 12 years. And the question for Libra is, what do they think? Pluto has no patience for social conventions, yet Libra is all about social conventions. So the people who were born during this time wrestle with an innate desire to speak their truth, even though it's really painful to do so. Um, they transform the art of relating for authentic connection. Um, so that's what the focus on transformation is for that group. There's a barrage of online marketers. I think that's really interesting. Online marketers that come from this generation who are using authenticity to sell. It's part of marketing. So it's no wonder that we see so many from this generation and the Pluto and Virgo generation. We just don't see them in politics. This group is, they dig deep into their inner resources to push back, to make a choice. They can get paralyzed with fear of making the wrong choice, and they're extremely conflicted and concerned that they may be accused of being unstable, and so they don't necessarily want to be in politics. Don't put them there. So they may lose their inner compass, getting lost in other people's points of view. Pop stars and actors are very likable, like Rashida Jones or Gwyneth Paltrow. You know, you have the they're personal, they're approachable. Um, the music it switched from grunge to boy bands all of a sudden, and child performers like Britney and Christina Aguilera and Justin Timberlake, and we stepped more fully into gender roles, even though they were arguing for more equal treatment. Like Roe versus Wade took place during this time. And concerns with relationships, partnerships, marriage, divorce was at its peak during this time, which is interesting because Libra's concerned with relating. Um, Issues around fairness, equity, and balance were at the forefront. Pleasure and leisure took center stage with some of the raciest shampoo commercials that you've ever seen. Like, ooh, I want what she's having or whatever. Okay, so here we go. Pluto and Scorpio, 1983 to 1995, stuck there for 12 years. So the question for Scorpio is, will my pain consume me? This group has got a lot. There's a lot of shock and awe with this group. I remember. I know I was growing up. I was a teenager during the time, and all of a sudden it was like everything's gonna kill you. You know, deodorant's gonna kill you, and sex is gonna kill. Everything's killing you. So we were like, everything's gonna kill us. Crave experiences that push the limit. Miley Cyrus and Lady Gaga are poster children for this generation. There's profound honesty with this generation as well. They're living in pain and accept that pain. You know, if you accept the pain, then you're going to get through. They can live in a world of tense anxiety. There's a love to, like, it's almost like an attraction to complicating things. There's a power, a mysteriousness to them, and like there's some bits of the obsession, and I lost my yeah, and negativity. There's more egocentrism, but that's due to a lot of this group being only children. There were more extracurriculars, and children were more sheltered when they were being raised at this point. You know, little ones. There was innocence lost. I know I was teaching this group. I often had to be really, really careful giving my first graders computers, because there was bound to be something that would pop up and it would be like, what, you know. So yeah, they were exposed to things that they were not necessarily ready for. Neptune and Capricorn. This group had Neptune and Capricorn. There was a really interesting conjunction. But Neptune and Capricorn is just serious to dreams. So there's serious to dreams. There could be delusions and nightmares. Like Freddy Krueger, things were elevated. Like these ideas were elevated. These kind of like, there's a genre movies, horror movie, torture porn, which is, you know, it's just super dark. It's not actual like porn, but it's like dark, it's intense, it's deeply, deeply disturbing. And there's a life or death anxiety. So yeah, there's a willingness to look at darkness head on with this group. A lot of them were diagnosed with ADHD or diagnosed with something, and so a lot of them were drugged. And um, so yeah, and a lot of it's kind of like I need to feel something. The struggle with dealing with real feelings, and reality TV came onto the scene at this time. Okay, next. So next we've got the Pluto and Sagittarius generation. 13 years. Sagittarius, the question is, am I right? And these kids are have grown up with school shootings being commonplace. Homeschooling became more of a thing, and cell phones. These kids have had cell phones in their hands since they were kids, or really, really little. And YouTube is the main source of entertainment. Social media, cyberbullying are all typical. Virtual reality, gaming addictions. Greta Thunberg is the poster child. I don't know. There's a really, really good documentary about her, just her work. She's fascinating. And so yeah, so she's the poster child of the Pluto and Sagittarius. There's definitely a depends on if you've got these kids in your life. If you do, then you know how they can just jab and just like get you where it hurts. I know I've got a couple of my own. So but yeah, I've got one, and she'll one of my kids is a Pluto and Sagittarius, and when I can feel the judgment. I'm like, oh no, I did something wrong. I said something wrong. But yeah, they're interested in seeking the truth, and knowing what's true and sharing it and conveying it with others. They explore shadow dynamics of being a true believer, and they love to party. It's funny because it's almost like you've got the Pluto and Scorpio generation, which are there's a heaviness about this, but then once Pluto entered uh, Sagittarius, they kind of kept this, things are heavy, and this is, but they've formed a belief system around it, and it's like, and now let's party. So oh, so they're obsessed with traveling all over the world and taking the best pic and putting it on Instagram and or TikTok. I don't know what the kids are doing these days. it's there's a what does this earth have to offer element. And finally, we got Capricorn, and of course, I mean, Aquarius comes after that. In 2025, Pluto will be moving into Aquarius, so that'll be interesting. But Pluto in Capricorn is serious. There's Plutonian veracity. I think it's yet to be seen what's going to be happening with this group. But in Aquarius, Pluto's going to be dipping into Aquarius in March of 2023, and then it'll retrograde back into Capricorn, and then between 2024 and 2044 it'll stay in Aquarius, and that's when I think we'll see a pretty interesting noticeable shift from our economy being very from things right now. There's a lot of focus on what's happening with the earth and what's happening with our economy, with money. Bitcoin is the thing. And so I think that there will be a shift. A lot of us are thinking there will be a shift to even more of an online um, society at this point. So it'll be very, very interesting. So we're going to talk about Pluto by house now. Pluto's house placement in personal charts. So this will reveal the old ego, the old shell of the personality, which is still active and which still embodies a considerable concentration of psychic energy. So wherever it's at in your chart, that's what it does. And as long as this energy remains unconscious and inextricably connected with old patterns of life, it acts as a psychological complex, which promotes compulsive and obsessive patterns of thought and behavior in your conscious life. So that was a Stephen Arroyo quote. He's great. I've got a book from him, a couple of books from him. If you're curious, if you want to know books, I've got books. So if you need any resources, let me know. But the house position corresponds with deep-seated psychic impressions resulting from past desires and actions, which now manifest as obsessions and compulsions that have no rational explanation. Like, why in the world do I keep on, petting my cat backwards or whatever? Like there's a, oftentimes you can see this in a chart with the Pluto position. It shows where one is living out of an old desire or pattern of behavior, and where the results of that overwhelming urge are creating pain or suffering. It shows the field of experience where we're meeting our old self and our past desires. Our confrontation with the old self is a really clear example of how difficult it is to live up to the idea of knowing thyself. It also indicates what work we have to do at the deepest levels of our being, and what patterns we need to let go of or eliminate or reject. And I'm going to get really into that here in a second. Pluto represents the energy that's necessary to do work in the underworld, whereas again, Mars represents energy that's necessary to do work in the outer world. And this is the house where you have a wellspring of concentrated power. So it's where someone will try and impose, or where one will try and impose their will on others. That was a mouthful, but yeah. So having, say, an eighth house Pluto is going to, you're kind of doling your will out onto the world. So you need to be very, very conscious of where your will is going. It's the area of life that complete regeneration needs to take place. There's a changing willfulness, compulsiveness, or ruthlessness into consciously usable power of great intensity, which manifests as penetrating insight, understanding of subtle forces, and the use of will to promote creative actions. So, where Pluto is in the chart will it's also where we're called to do healing work and to express the planet to our best ability. And it means that we have to excavate that part of life with our eyes wide open. So, in the first house, does everybody know where their Pluto is? Okay, what house it's in? Fabulous. Great. Okay. So, Kathy, you know yours? Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry. Do you have it with you? I can look it up. Okay, okay, okay. All right. I want to make sure you got it so you know. Okay. Um, if you have a first flirty first house Pluto, this is this is a really, really tricky Pluto to have. It's almost it's like having an almost like continual identity crisis throughout the first 25 years of life or longer. There's a sense of self needs to be changed throughout time, throughout your life. And there could be an insecurity and reserve that prevents you from expressing or understanding to the world freely. First house Pluto folks need to listen to others' opinions of them in order to generate a new feeling about themselves. So that's what makes it especially difficult. This is a very defensive Pluto about their sense of identity, inhibiting openness, and cooperation is difficult. And these folks often feel lonely and alienated from friends and family, and they can exhibit powerful concentration, though. These folks also, their source of power comes from a remarkable depth of insight into life's deeper meanings. A second house Pluto has an overwhelming desire to have control of material resources and as an aid to achieving peace of mind. These folks have an attitudes towards owning and possessing things or people, and this attitude needs to be transformed in order to achieve regeneration of values. Second house is about values. There's compulsive expenditures for these folks can be a source of difficulty. And there's extremely resource these folks are extremely resourceful in efforts to build material security, and they can be um, there can be understanding of deeper kinds of energy, which money represents. So that's the superpower behind these second house Pluto, is that they have the ability uh, to get in touch with the deeper meaning of money or value, and So a third house Pluto, this is a person who is there's compulsion is a typical Pluto word. So when I say compulsion, you know where that's coming from. But these are people who compulsively um, are very thorough with matters of communication, and they want to be absolutely sure that their ideas are being clearly transmitted. Um, there's an irritable way of speaking with others. They might, um, or their communication can be transformed into a creative ability to get into the depths of human interaction. Uh, these folks have great energies, hands-on. There's something about hands-on healing work. They're very gifted at this sort of thing, and they also have a power to be naturally talented in all forms of research. Fourth house Pluto is someone who has Plutonian compulsiveness in the home and within emotional depths of the person's psychological life. This can indicate a complex family experience from the time of being very, very young until later on, and all throughout life. There's a strong urge for security and for a place of rest and retreat. Home life is subject to upheavals and battles due to willfulness and obstinacy. Obstinance. I can't say that. I do not. My third house. I don't have third house Pluto, so it indicates a total reorientation that is needed in one's deepest feelings about themselves and one's sense of security. There's an inner peace and a contentment about these folks once they go through that transformation. And their superpower is indicating deep insight into other people's emotional needs. And there's an ability to penetrate into the unconscious mind of others. A fifth house Pluto has a strong compulsion to be somebody. And I just feel for, because I know somebody in my life who has this, and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally feel that. These folks desire to be the best and to be recognized as the best. And if their compulsion is transformed into a consciously usable and practically applicable power, this person can pioneer into new areas of creativity with unusual depth. There's a power and a thoroughness to this work, making it ahead of its time, and when they work creatively. And there's a close emotional relations with children and lovers serve to help these people learn a lot about themselves. This person must learn to be content with his life in order to transform as well, and they must learn to use this great energy to do something special rather than just wanting to be known as someone special. So it's a focus on doing rather than being, which is kind of contrary to what we're dealing with. Sixth house Pluto. This person wants to serve and wants to help others and wants to feel as if they're helpful, but there's a compulsion to serve others, often in ways that are not necessarily appreciated. It's almost like, forced help. These folks will do their best to work and to work by and with themselves, directing reformative energies toward their own personal transformation. And this indicates that matters of personal health or a particularly serious illness can be instrumental in producing great changes in one's attitudes and purification of one's values. And the superpower for I keep thinking Virgo because the sixth house is associated with Virgo, but this Pluto in the sixth house can indicate a talent in the healing arts as well. Seventh house Pluto will find marriage and close relationships in the place where personal transformation takes place. There can be a compulsion, or they can be compulsive and have painful emotional issues with close relationships. This person wants to give others a lot of freedom and wants to be liked, yet finds themselves unable to establish true rapport with others. And this person might, cooperation might be difficult for them, especially if this person finds that they're involved with others who have or who wield a definite power in their life. Marriage for these people can be really long lasting, and but only if the person accepts the personal change that's required to make it work. And eighth house Pluto, there's a compulsion to influence the world through the use of power, whether it be through socially acceptable channels of authority or through deep psychological forces, or like it's like almost like there's a penetrating quality to these folks. There's an inclination toward manipulating others and insisting that they change themselves according to their values. So that would be, the person who has Pluto in the eighth house might be insisting that others change for them, and it's like the other way around. You got to work on yourself. These folks will do their best to let others be themselves, or the best thing that that these folks can do is to allow others to be themselves and to concentrate on learning how to use their own personal power for his or her own personal transformation. There could be painfully compulsive experiences in the area of sexuality, and this person may need to reorient their use of power. um, Physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual power in order to resolve this complex. And ninth house Pluto, there's a compulsion to have and express strong beliefs and ideals that can guide this person's way of life. There's if it's manifested negatively, it can take the form of dogmatism, self-righteousness, and a need to convert or convince others that they are the ones who know the truth. Carl Jung wrote that one person's salvation is another person's damnation. And so it's really important for these folks to keep this in mind. And they let go of the desire to prove their beliefs. If they let go of their desire to prove their beliefs to themselves, and to preach it to others, if they can let go, then that's where transformation will happen. And as the years pass, this person could have profoundly deep experiences which serve to reorient their attitudes about God, truth, and the value of human life. A 10th house, Pluto, that's in the career house. This is a compulsiveness of Pluto to take the form of impatience toward authority, or resentment toward those in authority, or an overwhelming drive to establish themselves as outstanding in some way, and that will be recognized by others. These folks often can attain the position in the world in which they work, but it usually involves a long and somewhat painful reevaluation of their true motives and values. So again, they might be thrust into power, but then they need to really go inward to figure out what really matters to them to be more effective with that. They need to totally transform their attitudes toward worldly success, authority, and reputation. And ideally, it symbolizes an ability to see beyond the outer forms of authority and to develop an inner sense of responsibility about wielding authority. In the 11th house, Pluto there's a compulsion to be accepted by other people, and this person needs to has a need to achieve certain objectives that are consciously not very clear. So this is where things get really, really interesting. It's the 11th and 12th house Plutos are kind of like, whoa. Fixed ideas have to be changed in order for rebirth to take place in the areas of one's ultimate desires or sense of purpose. There's an emphasis on the future sometimes. This is the house of hopes and dreams, and so emphasis on the future sometimes takes such precedence for these people that the present is neglected. So if they can focus on being present, then they can kind of balance this out. Um, if these folks can learn to rely upon themselves rather than others for their fulfillment, knowing that their deepest hope for the future will be fulfilled only if it encompasses an entire transformation and clarification of their own creative purpose within the framework of social needs. So, does that make sense? Um, 12th house Pluto must transform the quality of his or her emotional life by an adherence to some belief or transcendental truth, which has the effect of liberating the self from confusing emotions. I was like, woo! That is, so this reorientation, it requires long periods of loneliness and abstention from social interaction. Dealing with other people has the effect of stirring up troublesome emotions. And these folks tend to be very empathetic. So yeah, dealing with other people has the potential to help have certain things bubble up that are just not comfortable. So yeah, and this is what this person is trying to transcend, to get through. These folks don't usually allow one-track emotional guilt patterns and feelings of self-persecution to gain the upper hand. And they need to define spiritual attitudes toward all of life. Since the 12th house has a lot to do with spirituality, they need to really just allow themselves to be there and kind of peel away from society and to really focus on that on their own. So once this transformation has progressed to a certain point, this person can develop the capacity to experience the unity of all life, which lies beneath the outer forms. So does anybody have any questions? Okay. All right, so we'll move on. All right, so we're going to talk about Pluto's placement and recent events. One of my favorite things. So historically, transits between the outer planets correspond with major world events. So I'm going to bring up this one. So here we go. Pluto intensifies even the most catastrophic extremes. With Pluto-Uranus cycles, you see cycles of major revolutions, such as the French Revolution. There's a Uranus-Pluto opposition that happened during the Reign of Terror. So this is the Reign of Terror chart. Here we've got Uranus, and here we've got Pluto. Major revolution. So the social change protests in the 1960s also had this element to them as well. There's a destructive and regenerative element to this. It's volcanic, there's upheaval, there's decay, it's almost like a purifying fire. There's violent purgatorial discharges. I love this. Violent purgatorial discharges of pent-up energies. I love that description. There's an element of life and death, extremes, titanic, demonic, taboo, like all of those extreme things. Anything that offends Venus is Plutonian. So Venus again can be equated with Persephone. Anything that would Venus also is interested in beauty and softness and love, and anything that would offend her would be Plutonian, could be considered Plutonian. So this is entering the underworld of our psyche. So the first Saturn-Pluto conjunction of the 20th century coincided with the buildup and eruption of World War II, building up an exact alignment on August, September, and October of 1914. The first square that after that occurred in 1921 to 1923 corresponded with the emergence of fascism. Saturn is the dictator archetype, and Pluto is intensification. And the following quarter was the Saturn opposite to Pluto, which happened in 1930 to 1933, and that coincided with the economic crisis and ascendancy of Nazism in Germany. And the closing square marked the beginning of World War II in 1939 to 1941. So here we go. Here's the Vietnam War. This one, these are other notable Pluto transits. We have, let's see where, oh, this is an interesting one. So here, this is the Vietnam War. This is right around also Woodstock. We have Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus. So Uranus often is correlated with revolution. Pluto is intensifying, and Jupiter's just in it for the fun. It's like, all right, let's party with this. It's like kicking around a soccer ball between these two. It's just that's pretty intense. And so subsequent square, let's see here. We've got September 11th is the next one that I wanted to show you. So we've got the Cold War, September 11th, and most recently we have COVID, but on September 11th, we have Saturn opposite Pluto. So here's Pluto, here's Saturn. Again, Saturn, it's like authoritarian authority. Pluto is just like, that fire, bah. So, and then we also have, and so this is most recently with in the 2020s, January 20th, 2020, we had a really, really interesting conjunction that was happening. It was Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter was just coming up, coming on up, and we had sun there. It was just like, this was crazy. So this was when over here in Okinawa, I think it was around that time that we had the Diamond Princess, I think that's what it was, the cruise line that had coronavirus docking here. So that's when it started to really, really bubble up. But yeah, it was, Pluto was at 23 degrees and Saturn was also at 23 degrees. Boom. And here's fast forward to March 24th, 2020. This is when we had Pluto at 24 degrees. We have Jupiter that came in close at 23 degrees. Mars decided to play. And then we have Saturn that just started dipping its toes into Aquarius, which is really interesting because that was also at the time when things started to go online and we had to go indoors. So that was a really fascinating correlation there. So again, Jupiter was there, just kind of exciting matters. Like, let's spread this around. It's going to be fun. That's what Jupiter likes to do. So next in February, we've got the USA Pluto return. It's the very first Pluto return. We don't know really what happens with a Pluto return. We've noticed what happens when Pluto hits these different spots. There's the squares and the oppositions, but Pluto's never returned before for the US. So we're not really sure what this means, but oftentimes what it does mean is you're going to see things that like, oh, I don't want to see that. I did not want to know that, but it's coming out anyway. And so we're seeing this in a societal context, I think, for sure. And we're seeing things with just the way that things are running with authority and our economy. The U.S. has Pluto in the second house, which again it relates with economy, and I think there's something about the sixth house as well. I'd have to take a look. I won't do that right now. I won't bore. But I'm like, ooh, again, I could go off on tangents. Let's not do that, Tony. But the sixth house is labor, forced labor, indentured servitude. Yeah, so it's really interesting to see. Stephen Forrest has a really good Pluto return talk if you're interested in it, and I can pass that to you as well. So yeah, again, I will not drone on that because I could just talk about it for years. But personal transits as pathways to transformation. That's what we're here for. When going through a Pluto transit, there's a certain degree of detective work that needs to be done. The planet is slow and it's thorough, and throughout this transit, unconscious contents are released. And again, that's what we're seeing in the US. You'll feel it on a personal level as well when it happens for you. Secrets that have been locked away in a vault can be revealed. And this is a time to become aware of old patterns that are active and playing out. Everybody goes through a Pluto square around 38 years old. So, if for those of you who have been 38, like just think back at that time, what was going on. Oftentimes and it can be very subtle too. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, boom, like this happened. I know for me, Pluto moving over my midheaven is associated with career. That Pluto moved me to from the States to Germany. So it was a pleasant Pluto transit. I was really happy with that one. But yeah, my personal Pluto square correlated with the passing of my bonus daughter. Um, so yeah, it's really interesting to see what was going on during those times. So at 38, you can kind of expect if you haven't been 38 yet, um, you can kind of expect for these like internal. There's going to be some sort of internal shift that happens at that age. It's important to note that fear comes from energies that are not examined and identified yet are part of ourselves. Refusing to look at them will keep them alive. So there are people that want to just kind of like close themselves off and take the covers and but you can't really escape it. It's going to be happening. It's going to happen. These shifts and these changes and this transformation, this transmutation is going to happen. So know that once you go through this work, this Pluto work, this Plutonian work, you don't have to hide anymore. There's truth. Pluto wants truth ultimately, and I think that's another thing with the U.S. Pluto wants truth. Like it's like, hey, this is what everybody's going to be dealing with. Isn't it fun? And hopefully we can deal with a whole lot of just the nastiness that we're seeing. Kind of brush it away and deal and focus on what needs to happen in order for that change and healing to take place. A Pluto transit can compel us to self transform, and it makes us ambitious. We think that again, we think that what we want is ours, but it's not. It's a Plutonian drive. So when you have that like massive drive, I know I did. It was like I will do anything to get overseas. I had to get out of New Mexico. It was driving me nuts, and so I was like, I'll do anything. I'll pray, and I got candles and I was lighting them. But ultimately, it was a Plutonian drive. I knew I had to get out, and I was just searching for everything and anything that I could to get out. And goodness, yeah, it worked. I was like, thank you, Pluto. But it can get involved, and you can get involved in power games. Pluto transiting, or yeah, transiting your natal Mars can be a really interesting one. That's when you might find yourself in authority conflicts. So asserting your power, finding your power through dealing with authority or dealing with power, other people who are powerful as well. So if you're going through a Pluto transit and you get obsessed with another person, with what another person is doing, like say you feel that they need to change, like it's often a projection, like you need to change. So I know that I've got a nemesis at work. She's driving me absolutely nuts. And I'm like, I'm realizing what I need to change now. So yeah, it's great. The real work of this transit is internal. You can't change other people. You got to change yourself. So it's when someone else is driving you absolutely bonkers, there's something about like, okay, well, what is it? I'm going to go inside. I'm going to figure out what that is. It's an opportunity to perceive your own power. So when it's within 5 degrees, so you've got these degrees that Pluto will be moving in a transit. So when it's within 5 degrees, you may hear that you may sense that it's coming close. But then when it's closer, the emotions start to come. And when it's peaking, when it's right there, um, it's when we're confronting the darkest bits. It's That's when it's at its most intense. Pluto transiting the earth houses like Virgo or Capricorn or Taurus, that could mean that you could be impacted by a job change of some sort. Um, if you're aware of the way that Pluto operates, issues will come up and you'll be able to lean into them and you'll be able to let them go. Um, Transits to the 11th house, that's the house of hopes and social groups. Um, this transit breaks down and renews friendships. Transits to Saturn, this could correlate with the death of a metaphorical father figure. It doesn't necessarily have to be your dad, but it could be a metaphorical father figure. When conjoining a personal planet, that's when like Saturn or Pluto is just kind of hanging out right on top of one of your personal planets. Um, this is almost like Pluto is being personified here. It's almost like you're bringing it in, and people might like you might notice yourself doing things that are Plutonian. Pluto in the eighth house, this signifies rebirth. And so there could be an element of if it's transiting through your eighth house or if it's transiting through your 11th house, it's just really interesting to notice what happens in those areas of life. And my favorite way to look at the way that Pluto operates is in relation to other outer planets as well. So Uranus, when Pluto is transiting Uranus, that could be the ending to a relationship. It's waking up one day. So like so like say you're going to you need to you're up for a breakup. It's like a relationship. You've been in this relationship. It's done its thing. So if Pluto and was transiting your Uranus and you were going to be going through a breakup, it would be like you wake up one day and you find that they wrote you a note saying that they were leaving and they're going away and they just go. If Pluto is transiting Neptune or if it's a Neptunian ending, um, you might notice that you're hanging out with your partner and every night you have wine, they have wine, then you notice that they have more and more and more wine and then the partner drinks too much and they're drunk and you can't even deal with it. It's like a gradual, very 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 gradual shift. But a Plutonian breakup would be more like you're at home and the partner leaves their phone and it's and again, this is like a more of a mysterious force too. So you're at home, partner leaves their phone there, you pick up the phone and you see a text from like their sister, and it says, what time are we meeting tonight? And you start to get this really yucky feeling in your stomach. And after seeing multiple texts like this, you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's something going on. So that's more of a Plutonian breakup. So there's complexity and it can be overwhelming. So, all right. So next, so we just talked about what happens when you're going through a transit, and so I wanted to lead you through a meditation. It's an inner child meditation, and so because a lot of times what ends up happening is Pluto will cause inner child wounds to bubble up and come to the surface. And so working with your inner child is particularly helpful. So I want to invite you to just take a breath, get settled. You can lay back if you want to lay back. You can get yourself something, cover yourself up if you want to. I know. You see, Kelsey's got her. She's got her blanket. She's ready to go. And it's okay if you turn the light off because this is being recorded, and I can, you can always watch the rest later. So, yeah. So take a deep breath and allow your eyes to close. And give your body permission to relax and be comfortable. And allow your body to just really feel the contact that it makes with the chair or the floor or the bed. Let it adjust itself in any way that it needs in order to be fully, fully comfortable. And as you tune into the rhythm of your breathing, in and out, in and out, imagine that when you inhale, you're inhaling a little bit of the sky. It's very clear and it's very open and very refreshing. Every time you inhale, let the sky fill your body with light and with openness, clarity and beauty. And when you exhale, imagine that you're letting go of everything that's old and stale and stressful, responsibilities, to-do lists, chores, cell phones ringing. Every time you exhale, just let go of all of this easily and naturally, breathing in and breathing out. Inhaling the light, clear sky. Exhaling that which is stressful. Inhaling, exhaling. Finding your own inner rhythm of breath. Listening within. Your body is relaxing a little bit more. A little bit more with every out breath. Allow your imagination to be open and receptive, still breathing in and breathing out. And you're going to take a little journey now. So, in your mind's eye, put on your favorite jacket and walking shoes. Imagine yourself opening the door to your apartment or house, and you're leaving right now in your imagination. Leave the building that you're in and close the door gently behind you. Your home will be there for you. All is safe when you're ready to return. Now imagine yourself walking outside your home, and through the power of your imagination, you can bring yourself very quickly anywhere you want. So find yourself walking somewhere safe and beautiful and peaceful and quiet, in the woods or by the ocean, near a river or a flower-filled meadow. Walking slowly or quickly, whatever suits you right now in this moment. Walking at whatever pace feels most comfortable to you. Notice the air around you. How does it feel on your skin? If it's warm, you might need to take off your jacket. Maybe you want to go barefoot. Is the sun out or is it nighttime? Become aware of any sounds close to you or in the distance, birds, animals, or other people, water, or just the whisper of the leaves on the trees. What do you hear? You're walking a bit more slowly now, and it feels like you're looking for something. You're feeling a bit tired and lonely now, and you decide that you want some company. So start looking for a cottage or a small house with another dwelling place, and you're going to know when you see it. Your soul will recognize this place as home. Spend a little time walking around this little house. And after a while, notice that the front door is open and a child is standing in the doorway. Start walking towards her. This is your inner child. When you're standing in front of her, reach out to her and hold her hands. You might want to stoop down so that you're at her level and look into her eyes. Say to her, I remember you. I know you. Notice how she responds to you when you say this. Notice everything about her. How old is she? What is she wearing? What kind of shoes does she have on? What does her hair look like? If it feels right to you, allow your inner child to bring you to her favorite room in this little house. Where does she take you? As you enter this room with your inner child, notice that there's a big, comfortable rocking chair there. So go to the rocking chair and sit in it. And if it feels right to you, invite this precious child into your lap. Hold her and rock her for a while. What does this feel like? After a while, ask your inner child if there's anything that she needs or wants from you. What can you do for her? How can you help her? What can you give her? Listen carefully. What is she saying to you? Now, continue rocking your little one in this beautiful room, in this beautiful, comfortable, and safe little house you found for your soul. Rocking slowly, giving comfort, receiving comfort. And just for a moment, see if you can switch places with your child. Just for a moment. Imagine that you are the little one who's being held and rocked in the arms of a loving, tender adult being. Slowly being rocked by this loving grown up. And if you can, allow their big, unconditional love to wash over you. You might imagine that you're being held by an angel, or by your own mother, or by an imaginary mother who only sees the good in you, who only wants the best for you, whose only response to you is love. Allow yourself to bask in this for a few moments. You are the child. Allow yourself to be a little girl again. Allow yourself to be held and cherished. Listen as this beautiful being asks you what you need or want right now. What do you need? What do you want? How do you respond? What are you saying to this one who loves you just as you are? Who rocks you tenderly in this beautiful, safe place? Right now, just in this moment, what do you need? What do you want? Allowing yourself to be rocked gently, gently rocking. Now, switch places again with the loving adult. You are the loving adult who is rocking this beautiful, precious child. You might want to kiss this child on the forehead. You might want to stroke her hair. Find some way to communicate how much you love her and how much you will always love her. Now tell her that it's time for you to go. And if it feels right, ask her if she would like to go with you. Maybe maybe she has some questions. Listen and see what she has to say about going with you. If she has agreed, gently set her down on the floor and take her hand as you get up from the rocking chair. See if she needs a coat or a hat or shoes or mittens before you leave the little house. Then, hand in hand, walk out together and begin to retrace your steps slowly. And if she does not want to come with you at this time, that's okay. Just reassure her that it's perfectly fine. Remind her that you can hear her and that you can be there with her anytime she calls out for you. Thank her for letting you spend time with her today. Then say goodbye to her lovingly and begin to retrace your steps slowly, walking back the way you came, finding your way back home to the street you live on, to the apartment building or house that is yours in the real world. Remember that you're not walking alone. This little girl is here with you, and she's in your care. Show her your home. Allow her to explore. Notice her delight to be sharing this time and this life with you. Now take a few moments to focus on your breath, to feel your feet on the floor, your legs, your back against the chair, or whatever it is that you're sitting on or lying on. Feel your shoulders, your neck, your head. And again, feel your breath as it enters through your nose and your mouth. And it shimmers through your body and exits. Feel your stomach rising and falling with each breath. And then in your own time, slowly come back to the room that you're in. And when you're ready, open your eyes. There's no rush. Just take your time. All is well. Good morning, everyone. I'm curious to know how that went for everybody.
I must have fallen asleep because
okay.
when I heard what do you want, I just because I'm in a very transitional point in my life, and so I've been asking that question a lot, and I'm like, dude, honestly, I want some clarity. I need to do a clarity session on how to get clarity. And so I must have fallen asleep. And when you asked that question, I just eyes popped open and was like, where am I? And then I was like, oh yeah, I must have fallen asleep. But apparently what do you want was like, boom.
Wow, that's
very
interesting.
Yeah, I was like, because when you're just coming out of being asleep and you're like, oh, I didn't know. But it was like, what do you want? And I did. My eyes were just like,
Oh,
oh
wow.
yeah. Oh, I'm safe. No, we're okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering what sort of outer planets you've got going on right now too, because or the transits, because those transpersonal planets, if you've got a Neptune thing happening, it's like, where am I? What am I? What, what happened? What's going on? So I'm
What
like,
just
I'm
happened?
wondering if that could be a Neptune thing.
Who am I? Where am I? I'm hungry.
I'm hungry. That's an important one. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? And you can put things in the chat too. That's fine. It works. So, okay. All right. Well, so working with inner child stuff and doing this sort of work is often really, really, really helpful um, with Pluto transits. Since Pluto has a tendency to be like, okay, all right, remember when you were 5, and you know, things that you just wouldn't normally just you know, you're walking along, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, now I'm having all these memories from like this one time, and it's causing me to act in this certain way, and so oftentimes it requires just going back to that time and really sensing um, for what that inner child needs. Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'll do is I'm going to take the recording, or I'm going to take that inner child meditation, and I'll separate it so that you can access it whenever you want. Um, yeah. And I'll just have it in audio format, and you can just put it on your phone or whatever and lay back and chill out. Something else that could be really, really helpful is doing the meditation and then writing for a while. Taking a pen and putting it in your non-dominant hand and having a conversation with the inner child is really interesting. So the inner child would be your non-dominant hand. Have them just ask them a question, and then they respond, because it causes the other side of the brain to like click into gear, and then it's really interesting to see what comes out after that. So with your dominant hand, you can ask the question, and the non-dominant hand answers, and that's a really interesting inner child technique as well. So I think that's fun. So yeah, does anybody have any questions at this point? We're going to be closing out here soon. Awesome. Q&A. Aha. I remembered. Okay. Um, any questions? Anything? You can drop comments, whatever. It's all good. I know that we're going to do after this. Um, yeah, I'll talk about it here in a minute. But if there are no questions, then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'm going to stop the share. I'll also stop the recording. And I want to tell everybody who is not here today, but is watching the recording. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and I'll see you soon.